Helps to get the mute button pressed. Welcome to TaNaCh Talk. I'm your host, William Moore, broadcasting live from Kingsland, Texas, USA, with another episode of Controversial Issues with the most controversial rabbi on the internet, Rabbi Chaim Checkmate Coffman. Welcome back, Rabbi. How are you today, sir?
Doing very good.
Good
as always.
Good to see you back.
No complaint.
Very good. Very good. So the hotness of today's title, the spicy little taco, has to do with the findings. Because, I've been catching heat from a long time from Christians, from Messianic Christians. They call themselves Messianic Jews. Even from people who have come out of the New Testament completely, but they've carried the baggage of what they thought they knew about the oral law, the Talmud, and they're still carrying that baggage, and so they still think some of them still think that it's wrong. A lot of them don't even realize that the oral law was definitely taught. Well, maybe not taught, but it was kept and observed, and there's proof, actual proof of that in the New Testament. One of them, I think, is in Timothy or somewhere like that. I'll look it up for you if you need to. But it talks about the Sabbath day's journey, right? So you don't find anything in the law itself, in the Torah itself, about a Sabbath day's journey. You have to go to the oral law to find that, right? And they talk about phylacteries, which is tefillin, right? That's the Greek, approach to tefillin. They even have mentioned the idea of the fringes, as tzitzit. Jesus criticized the Pharisees for making them much more large and glorious than everybody else's. He didn't criticize them wearing them. He just basically said that, you guys shouldn't be making them bigger than everybody else's. Being all proud about it. Lining them with gold and stuff. I'm just kidding. I'm not sure if that's what it was, but there's the concept right there. So there's absolute proof beyond the shadow of a doubt that in the New Testament the oral law was being practiced, and even Jesus himself did not criticize it. He just criticized people who were misusing it. So so tonight's topic you're bringing in is some of the aspects of it, and how do you, what's the best way to approach someone who has left the church, but maybe they're still carrying a little bit baggage. I'm not really sure how. I just want tonight to be about the oral law and why it makes sense and the application thereof and things like that. I'm really not sure in my own head how I pictured this being delivered, but I know that's what caused the thought right there. Was the title that I made was because if there's proof of it in existence and it was then, why can't the Christians and Messianics and whoever else, why don't they accept it? That's kind of
and obviously if I get it wrong, we're gonna get all this hate mail anyway. So
sure.
There's almost no easy way out, is there?
Right, very true. Yes, very true. So I'm going to pass it along to you and just take it where you need to. I'll keep my eyes open for comments.
Okay. Always, as we said, always a pleasure to be here. There's a fundamental question, when it comes to oral law in general, and the question, the question really is, what do we need it for? They have, quote unquote, their own rabbis, people are people. My opinion is just as valid, so to speak. But, one thing, and I guess this is going to be the short answer. And that is, if you look at the Torah itself, we'll get to, the Christian claims, which makes, actually, maybe we'll hit that first. The idea that, Christians will say, or Messianics will say, we don't need the rabbis. We don't need oral law. We don't need them for anything, so to speak. Now, I would be much happier if they would say, well, we pick and choose. Well, you mentioned a number of things, tefillin, other, phylacteries, whatever you want to call them, other things that certainly the New Testament mentions, right? The obvious question is, well, with translation, right? We'll get to that. The New Testament translation, so to speak, or any translation, is relying on what we call the Masoretic text. Now, the Masoretic text, as most people know, or if you don't know, the Torah itself, if you look at a Torah scroll has no vowels. So if a Torah scroll has no vowels, how is it possible to know what the words say? How are we supposed to know what the words are? what the words are, what they say. In other words, I look at a Torah scroll. The Torah can tell me, let's say, don't cook a calf in its mother's chet lamed beis. What's chet lamed beis? It could be chalev, meaning forbidden fat, with the vowels, or it could be chalav, which means milk. Now, how do I know? How do I know what it is? If you tell me can't cook a mother in its own fat, well, can never eat fried foods, right? That's probably, mainstay of most, most yeshivas, of, most Orthodox schools, so to speak. So that wouldn't make any sense. So how do I know what it is? How do I know what it is? I only know because the rabbis put vowels in. So if the Christians or the Messianics would say, we pick and choose what the rabbis say, right? If they would pick and choose what the rabbis say, then I wouldn't have an issue. I'd have less of an issue. But the fact is, they say, no, we don't need the rabbis. We don't need them for anything. How do you know how to read what it says, right? How do we read, what it says? There are many things, right? There are many things. There are many things like that. Now, one thing to keep in mind, is that the Torah itself says in Deuteronomy chapter 17, verses 9 and 10, you shall come to the Kohanim, the Levites, the judge will be in those days. You'll inquire, they will tell you the word of judgment. You'll do according to the words that they will tell you from that place that Hashem will choose. And you should be careful to do according to what they will teach you, right? Not only that, if you get it wrong, right? In other words, you be liable. Seemingly, whatever they say, was left is right, right is left, so to speak. Whatever they say. So, you have an obligation to listen to the Kohanim, the Levites, the judge in those days. Who is that? Right? That becomes the rabbis of every generation. So, whatever they say, that doesn't matter. You have to listen to what they say. Now, back to what I was going to get to. And that is that the Torah itself, if you look at it, 80% or more does not make logical sense. Does not make logical sense. Right? The Torah, Book of Leviticus chapter 23, right? It talks about we're getting Sunday night. It's going to be Sukkot, for everybody, for all Jews around the world. And the Torah says I have to sit in the sukkah. Right? The Torah doesn't tell me what a sukkah is. Doesn't tell me does it have walls. Doesn't tell me if it has a roof. Right? It tells me nothing. And it says I have to bring certain things in front of God. I have to bring palm fronds. I have to bring willows. I have to bring myrtle leaves. Doesn't tell me how many. And it says I have to bring a nice smelling fruit. Gee, what's a nice smelling fruit over here? A nice smelling fruit can be, someone thinks it's a pomegranate. Someone thinks it's a watermelon. Someone else thinks it's a strawberry. Someone thinks it's a quince. Someone thinks, I don't know, you fill in the blank. No one in their right mind is going to say, hey, I know what that is. That's a lemon on steroids. That's my citron. That's my estro. Come on, who's going to say such a thing? No one's going to, who's going to come up with such an idea? And the thing has to be so bumpy and it has to have a certain size. And, there are many things. Many things, within the Torah itself. There's no explanation. There's no explanation what it is. Now, you brought up tefillin, right? Phylacteries. The Torah says that you have to bind them. You have to wear them. You have to bind them, between frontlets, between your eyes, right? Bind them on the arm and bind them as frontlets between your eyes. Does anyone know? Does anyone know what frontlets are? I don't even know what frontlets are. Not only that, the Hebrew itself, it uses the word totafot when it talks about tefillin. Now, if people aren't aware the word totafot, Rashi says is not a Hebrew word. It happens to be an African word, right? A Coptic word, right? So, therefore, how would I know what they are? How do I know what color they are? Are they straps? What? Again, no definitions. If I have no definitions, where do I get definitions from? So again, we're going to go back to the original premise. If they're going to say we pick and choose, that's one thing, right? But there's an obvious inherent contradiction. If they say we don't hold by oral law, then why is it you'll see Messianics with the talus? You may even see them with a blue thread on the talus. What's the blue thread? Techelis, right? Techelis, that's, it's a whole question if we know, what the real color is and if we really have it today or not. Some say we do. Many rabbis say we don't, so a person shouldn't wear it, right? But regardless, how do we know what it is? It's been lost, throughout the generations. Some will say we got it back. We understand what this chilul hazon, whatever the chilul hazon is that they made from the dye. They made the dye for techelis. So some say we know what it is. Others say, not that way. So there's a whole discussion, but everyone agrees. Everyone agrees over here, the whole dimensions and this and that, right? It's coming from the rabbis. So why would they wear that? Why would they do that? Why would, sitting in a sukkah, another good example, right? Another good example. Why is it, they're going to sit in a sukkah? We have no dimensions, we have no nothing. Someone here points out, just like a yarmulke or a kippah, same thing, right? And many things throughout the the Torah that's brought down, it's brought down by what the rabbis tell us. We need definitions. The Torah itself, is a law code, but it does not give definitions. Because let's call a spade. If the Torah would, right? If the Torah would give us definitions of what everything is. Imagine, in a couple of weeks, we're going to start from the beginning of the book of Genesis, right? Very good. So if you go through the first 6 days about creation, what in the world's going on if you don't have, if you don't have Kabbalah? Well, what in the world's going on? We have no, information over here. What exactly is going on? So there are a million and a half things. 1.5 million things over here, within the Torah itself that that we don't have any explanation. If it would be, it's a law code, if it would give all the explanation, no one would ever finish it. Because there would be thousands and millions of pages, of explanation. Well, some say like this, some say like that, some say the other thing, some say the other thing over here. There's also a question, Orla, right? What does Orla mean? Orla can mean that when a tree is planted, after the 3rd year, within 3 years, you can't, if there's fruit, you can't eat from the fruit. You're not allowed to eat from the fruit. That's what the Torah says. Very good. So Orla can also mean foreskin, right? It can also mean foreskin over here, i.e. circumcision. How do I know what it is, right? So I remember when I was first learning how to learn and learn Gemara and learn Talmud, right? So there are certain phrases that come up quite a bit. So, I would ask, how do you know, what this means, right? So the answer was, context. We always say context is already 98% of the game, learning things in context. But I hated that answer. I said, what do you mean? I have to sit there and now, rack my brain. Does it mean like this? Does it mean like that? Does it mean, the other thing? But if something comes up 10 times, 100 times, 1,000 times, every time it comes up, you're going to know what it means, right? You're going to know because, obviously you're going to see it, you're going to see it in, you're going to see it in context, in context over here, but the whole idea is I need a running commentary. If I don't have a running commentary, then I don't know what anything means. The Torah can tell me, don't kill, right? So it's one of the 10 commandments. It's one of the 7 no-hide laws, right? Even though there are more than 7 no-hide laws is just an umbrella. These 7 is really 50 or 60, according to, it depends who you hold like. Regardless, if a person kills someone, God forbid, in self-defense, is that murder? If, a person if there's an abortion, is that considered murder? Let's say, someone's in hospice, and they're suffering, whatever, they pull the plug, whatever the case is that murder? Say, no, that's mercy. Well, where do we get definitions from? Right? So there are, I could be here till tomorrow. You never give me that amount of time, and I don't have that amount of time. We go through 100 examples, 1,000 examples, of things within the Torah itself that do not have any definition, right? And if you don't have any definition of what it is, how are you going to know what to do? So we spoke about the Karaites weeks back. They have to have their own interpretations, right? How are they going to know what, how are they going to know what to do? And if they wear tefillin, right? Karaites wear tefillin, right? How do they know what tefillin is? How do they know what the tradition is? Of wearing tefillin, they shouldn't know, right? They're gonna say we're gonna keep to what the Torah says. We're not gonna listen to what the rabbis say. Very good. So it says put frontlets between your eyes. What are frontlets? Oh, gee, they have the same thing we do, right? Similar thing. How do they know what to put in tefillin? How do they know what to write on the parchment? There are 100 things, right? 100 things over here, 1,000 things over here, right? So the simple explanation is, I have to listen to them, because if I wouldn't listen to them, or I wouldn't listen to somebody, so to speak, how in the world am I going to know? How am I going to know what to do? I wouldn't know what to do. Not only wouldn't I know what to do, right, but I could be liable for things that you'd say, well, it's unfair. You'd say, come on, if it's going to be that a person's liable for, God forbid, something they did, the laws of Shabbos. The Torah tells me 3 things by the laws of Shabbos. You're not allowed to carry. You're not allowed to kindle a fire, and you're not allowed to cook. Okay, Torah, but the Torah doesn't tell me anything else. Doesn't tell me what a fire is, right? Is a microwave considered a fire? Is gas on the stove considered a fire, right? Maybe it does the same thing, Maybe it has similar character traits, but certainly in time of the Torah, didn't have that. So you can say, oh, the rabbis made it up. So again, what's considered fire? Some will say, well, if I flick on a switch or turn it off, right? Electricity, is that considered fire? Many say it's not fire, it's something else, but they'll say, well, when I do that, it doesn't do anything. And we hold it's forbidden. Right? We hold that it's forbidden over here. Could be for any number of reasons. Why? But, I always tell people, oh, you don't think you're doing anything when you flick a switch? Very good. I said, I got an idea. Take off the plastic cover, right? Take off the plastic cover, of your outlet, and take a screwdriver and stick it in. So I would never do that. So why not? The question is, what categories that fall under, right, etc. So the Torah doesn't tell me anything. Torah just says on Shabbos, don't do this. Don't kindle a fire, don't cook, and don't carry. Okay. Anything else? Torah doesn't tell me. Torah doesn't tell me. Now, what does the Torah explain? The Torah explains if I get it wrong, I get the death penalty. Right? 100%, I'm liable. I'm liable for the death penalty, and you get spiritually cut off. You get whacked twice. One is that if there would be a temple in Jerusalem, and there was a warning, right, by witnesses and all that, and the person said, I don't care, I'm going to do it anyway, fine, right? They would get the death penalty. Even if no one ever got the death penalty, it doesn't really matter. The point is, it has that potential, that it's that severe. And then you get spiritually cut off. Now, if the Torah wouldn't tell me what the definition is, of what forbidden, quote unquote, work is, then what would I understand? Right? Then I'd understand if you're liable for a death penalty, then, that wouldn't be fair. Why? You're not telling me. You're not explaining. You're not explaining what it is. Right? You're totally not explaining over here. Right? So now, when it comes to these words in general, right? Someone points out, we mentioned, right? Torah scroll doesn't have vowels. So therefore you have to know how to pronounce the words. There's the words Yud Reish Aleph Hey, right? The word could be pronounced Yira, right? Which means fear, like Yirat Hashem, means fear of God. You could pronounce it Yireh. What does Yireh mean? He will see, right? That he sees, right? You can pronounce it Yera'eh, which means it will be seen, has been seen, i.e. to demonstrate. It could be pronounced Yora'ah, he will show, right? So again, pronunciation is important to understand, what is being said. So if you don't know how to pronounce it, right? You don't know things. How are you going to know what it says? You're going to know what it says because someone's going to tell you how to pronounce it. How do they know how to pronounce it? That's what oral law is, how you read it. So when the Christians come along, the Muslims come along, and they are relying, as we said before, 100%, not 80%, not 87.8%, not 99.9%. 100% they are relying on oral tradition. They are relying on our pronunciation. Now, that's how they get their translation, or anybody who's out there going to translate it. That's where they're getting it from. So if that's true, they cannot say, again, this is a lie, 100% a lie. They can never say, we never, ever, ever rely on the rabbis. Totally not true. 100% not true. If they say we pick and choose, I'll cut you a lot of slack. So we'll give an example. We'll give another example. There's a book. There's an English book. It's called Eat, Shoots, and Leaves. Now, what's the book about? I'm sure everyone's going to love this. English punctuation. Right now, it's got a picture. If you look on the front of the cover, it's got a picture of a panda on a ladder. Now, the panda's climbing up the ladder, or is on the ladder, right? And what is he doing? Right? And it says eats, comma, shoots, and leaves. Right? Now, what's the panda doing? So the panda on the front is erasing the comma after the word eats. Now, why is he doing it? Right? You're gonna say, because he got nothing better to do. They put a panda on in order to erase comments. Why did he do that? Right? Why is he doing that? Because if it says eats, shoots, and leaves, right? Eats, comma, shoots, and leaves, then it's slandering the world of the entire panda community. Why? Right? No offense, anyone who loves pandas over here. Right? Nice, cute animals, whatever. This would mean pandas eats, then shoots, and leaves. Right? It's kind of strange, right? They eat, then they shoot, then they leave. If you erase the comma, then you see a panda eats, shoots, and leaves. Big difference. Right? Big difference. Right? Or let's say there's a sign. There's a sign that says no swimming allowed. Right? There's a sign, can't go swimming over here. So what do? You put a comma in front of the no, after the no. You say, no, swimming allowed. Right? Depends where you put the comma. Right? Over here. So if the Torah is going to be read in synagogue, it's really sung. It's really sung with what we call tamei mikra, right? Or tunes, which provide punctuation. Anyone who's ever seen, in Hebrew, there's punctuation, right? In the Torah, right? Not in the Torah scroll, but in whatever, with the vowels and all that, right? So you'll see that there's punctuation. Now, how do I know? How do we know? What the punctuation is. How do I know, how do we know where it stops, where a verse stops, where it ends, where it's in the middle, different things. I need oral tradition, over here. So, as we mentioned as well, how do you have a legal text doesn't say anything, right? Doesn't explain anything. How do you define work by Shabbos? Right? Work equals force, right? Plus displacement, right? Times displacement, right? i.e. distance. So lifting up a paper is not forbidden on Shabbos, right? That's not considered, work. Work, according to physics, is only when I displace. It's only force by displacement. But what if I was moving my sofa all across my living room, on Shabbos? I would go against Coffman's 615th commandment, don't be stupid, but I could do it. Let's say I did it. I'm not doing it for exercise. I could do it. But isn't this force times displacement, right? I move it, I pick it up, whatever the case is, but that's permissible. So how do I define that? Yom Kippur, we just came out of Yom Kippur. Torah says the 10th day of the 7th month, right? What's the 10th day of the 7th month? Don't know. Where do we start counting from? What are the months? Does the Torah tell me? Does it start? We understand it's Yom Kippur. So how do you know when the day starts? Starts, when the sun comes up. Does it start at night? When does it end? Torah tells me what you should do on Yom Kippur. It says, "V'nisem es nafsho seichem." Literally, it means you should afflict your soul. Question is, what's affliction? Over here, right? If I just had the written Torah, so to speak, what could affliction be? Reading Dostoevsky, right? Reading Russian novels, rolling around on thumbtacks, or both, right? Maybe eating lighter fluid, drinking lighter fluid. I don't know. Something that afflicts the body. Torah doesn't tell me, right? But a person's going to say, come on, even if you want to tell me it's afflicting the soul, who says it's talking about not eating and drinking, right? That's again what the rabbis, tell us. So, we'll explain like this. It could be, let's say, like written notes in a lecture, right? Let's say a person's taking a class in chemistry. You're taking a course. You're taking notes. Sorry, in taking notes. What do you do? You have the word salt. What is salt? Right? What is salt? Is NaCl. Or let's say for gold is AU, or lead is PB, right? Any of these things, right? For chemistry, these are abbreviations. And so it said, for a chemical reaction. So if that is true, then when you look at it, you see all these funny things. You see NaCl, you see PB, you see different things on the periodical chart. It's part of the periodical chart, but it represents something. It represents a chemical reaction over here. So you wrote all these things, shorthand, right? We'll call it shorthand, or abbreviations, whatever you want to call it. So now, someone didn't make it to class, or someone else, even not in the class, say, "Oh, what'd you learn today?" So here, take a look at my notes, and they see all these things. They see NaCl, they see AU, they see PB. They can't make heads or tails of it. They have no idea what it is. It looks like some sort of code or whatever it is. So if you never heard the lecture, if a person never heard the lecture, you don't know the shorthand. It's impossible. It's impossible to know. If you heard the lecture and you know what the shorthand is, so that's different. Then everything looks a lot clearer. So now, when you look at the Torah itself, the written law, as we would call it, the written law is the lecture. That are the notes to the lecture. Got it backwards. That's the notes to the lecture. The entire lecture itself. What's the entire lecture? Torah law. So when did the Jews hear the lecture? So they're in the desert 40 years. Most of the events that take place were between the first year and the last year. So now let's think about it. Now, sure, most people haven't necessarily thought about it in this way. There are 38 years in between. I have 38 years. Now, let's say the Torah tells me there are, who's at Mount Sinai? How many people were at Mount Sinai? So the Torah says 600,000 men between the ages of 20 and 60, not including women and children. So give or take 2 to 3 million people, let's say, right? So now I got 38 years. I got 38 years in between. If I have 38 years in between, then what in the world is Moses telling them? What is he teaching them? If you tell me, listen, the Torah says don't steal, don't kill, we have slaves, if this happens, you injure somebody, etc. It goes through the whole list. So if we agreed there were 613 commandments, how long would it take Moses to teach other people to teach the masses? Now, 3 million people is a lot of people. I get it. So you tell me you take 1,000 people, 10,000 people. How long can it be just to take what it means, what they are? Forget about what it means. What it means is a different issue, right? Just to teach them what the mitzvahs are. How long could it take? 3 million people. 2 years. 5 years. 10 years. I mean, again, You're going to have to review. They're going to have to give, mnemonics of how they're going to review and how they're going to remember and all these different things. Very good. But is it going to take 40 years? 40 years, 38 years is a long time. 38 years is a long time over here. So what is he doing? What is Moses doing? And he's teaching the elders and the elders to the people. What is he doing for 38 years? It's not like they had all these distractions, right, so to speak. Well, what's going on? So with these 38 years, there's a lecture, right? You're getting a lecture on Judaism, transmitted to us, and notes for the 5 books. Now, those were the notes. So if you heard the lecture, very good. Then I understand the notes. If I didn't hear the lecture, it's a whole different issue, right? Then how are you going to know? Right? So if you went to somebody totally doesn't understand, what the Torah is, and as we mentioned, they said, oh, by the way, our teacher told us, through Moses that he heard from God, you got to put frontlets between your eyes and a sign upon your arm. I don't know. What is it? So maybe they had a piercing parlor. They say, okay, I want a frontlet between my eyes. I want a sign upon my arm. What are you going to do? First, roll up his sleeves, and put who knows? Put a dragon there. Put who knows what? Maybe that's what it is. Maybe it's a tattoo, right? Maybe it's a tattoo of your mother. Maybe it's a tattoo of, I don't know, street sign. It could be a tattoo of a dragon. Who knows? Whatever it is. Now, we understand. We're familiar. We understand the notes, right? That means phylacteries. That means tefillin, right? That makes perfect sense, right? And I'm going to bind them, right? 100%. I'm going to bind them in my arm, right? So, very good, except for the fact that I have to know how they're made, right? 100%, right? I have to know how they're made, and what they are. And a lot of these things have, a lot of information, a tremendous amount, a tremendous amount of information, over here, So if somebody ever mentions, okay, you got the Samaritans, they do it. How do they work? How do they read it without vowels? How does anyone understand what it means? Right? So I'm going to go live here and say they can't understand what it means. It's impossible to understand what it means. Right? Because again, it's a law book. If the Torah tells me like we're going to sit in a sukkah starting Sunday night, if it says you're going to sit in a sukkah, right? You have to dwell in a sukkah. Right? So let's say they get it right. Right? I'll be generous here. Let's say they get it right. They get it right and they say, okay, it means to sit in a sukkah. Okay. Right? I don't believe they'll get it right, but let's say they get it right. So now what? So now what does it mean? They are going to have to use their own definitions of what they think it means. And it's not going to be collective. People are going to have, someone's going to think it means this. Sukkahs is a good example, right? This lemon on steroids, my esrog. People are going to come up with all kinds of ideas what it is. What does it mean, a nice smelling fruit? Grapes. Someone here mentioned, imagine trying to carry a watermelon, trying to shake a lulav with a watermelon. Good luck. Maybe it means a pineapple. Good luck with that. Maybe I have to wear gloves, right, in order to shake my pineapple. Maybe I have to cut it open. Again, how are they going to know? How are they going to know what it means? Right? I'm not, someone that points out, they know. How do they know? How in the world would they know? Right? A sukkah, for instance, samich vav chaf hey. Right? That's the Hebrew. Maybe it means socheh. Socheh means to anoint. Maybe it means that, right? But it says you have to, it says that I have to dwell in it. So they have to come up with definitions, what it means, what all these words. It's like putting together a 1,000,000-piece puzzle, trying to figure out what the words are. Rabbis made it easy. They made it extremely easy, right? They put in the vowels. If I wouldn't have the vowels, I have no idea. Any translation, I don't care whose translation it is, any translation is going to have to come up with what the words mean. Now, if you look at translation in different languages, whether it's in English, whether it's in French, whether it's in Spanish, whatever the language is, they are basing their translation based on what? Based on the vowels the rabbis put in. That's what they're relying on. They're not relying, and not only that, if you compare, if someone was linguistic and they knew a whole bunch of languages, let's say they know Spanish, they know Italian, they know French, they know English, whatever the case is, they compare the translations. The translations 100% are going to be the same, right? They may be different words in different languages to explain the same thing, right? But essentially, they're getting it from one source. If they're getting it from one source, what's the source? It has to be 100%. The source has to be with the fact that I have vowels, right? 100%, right? That's what it has to be. There's no question. Again, how would I, if you go back and there are sources that, ancient mikvahs that were found, 1,000 years old, 2,000 years old, etc. So interesting, the way they are built and what they are totally corresponds to exactly what the rabbis say. Now, the Torah doesn't tell me what a mikveh is, right? It tells me that you can use it, it's something for purification, right? For different things. Dimensions, doesn't tell me anything, right? Doesn't tell me anything over here. So, that being the case, it goes back, that's what I wanted to say, it goes back more than 2,000 years, right? Now, the written Torah says it's a pit, a spring, collection of water. That will make somebody pure. Now, there are hundreds of laws over here. So there were mikvahs found on Masada, Herodian mikvahs, all of them, not one exception, all of them conform to the code of Jewish law in the 17th century. And these mikvahs predate by how many? How many years? 2,000 years, right? Or let's say better, let's say 1,500 years between the 17th century and that, a little more than 2,000 years, right? So therefore, it makes sense that I have all these different mikvahs, but they're all the same, right? The dimensions are the same. Some may be bigger, or whatever the case is, but there's a water source coming in, right? It's rain, it's going to come through some sort of pipe, or through something that's going to, go in, etc. They're all the same, right? So if I see laws much later, but the Torah tells me it's a pit, a spring, collection of water, but they all conform to the code of Jewish law, right? And all these mikvahs predate that. Boy, what an interesting coincidence over here. You look at the Dead Sea Scrolls, no different, right? There are no discrepancies, right? No discrepancies. There are some spelling discrepancies, but that's not a contradiction. So you say, oh, look, see? Some things are spelled differently. You have words, maybe you have a half a dozen words, or more, that may be spelled a little bit differently. Okay, so maybe they'll have a hey at the end of the word, they'll have an ayin at the end of the word, etc. That just means they lost, they lost, transmission of how something was spelled. Doesn't change the meaning. Like, let's we'll make a very quick point here. When someone reads the Torah, during the week on Shabbos, and they mispronounce a word. Now, when do you correct a person? When they mispronounce a word, when it changes the definition. If it doesn't change the definition, okay, we're not going to do anything. We're not going to say anything because it doesn't change anything. Here, if there was there was a hey, there was an ayin, there was an aleph, whatever it is at the end of the word, and it would change the definition, that's a different issue, right? But these other, let's say, quote unquote mistakes that they had. I don't want to say it's a mistake, it's just a mistransmission over here. So with this, with this mistransmission, I can have things that don't, maybe some of the words, are not spelled exactly, but, we know what the words are. That has certainly been fixed, but that's just, through time, that certain things were misspelled. It could have been misspelled, but it doesn't change any, definition over here. The prophet Jeremiah talks about the prohibition of carrying and commerce on Shabbos. Now, the Torah doesn't say. What does the Torah tell me? The Torah tells me I can't carry, I can't cook, right? And I can't kindle a fire. Can't light a fire over here. So who says I can't, I can't do commerce, so to speak? Torah doesn't tell me that. Now, if Jeremiah is a prophet, and everyone agrees Jeremiah is a prophet, we said by internal logic you cannot contradict what Moshe Rabbeinu says. Can't go against what Moshe Rabbeinu says. That God himself says. Moshe Rabbeinu is my trusted prophet. You do what he says. Moshe Rabbeinu says you can't add and subtract. That's another issue, right? Which we haven't hit. Is that, don't the rabbis come and add and subtract over here? That's what everyone's going to say. We don't do that. Messianics say we don't do that. Right? Of course we don't do that. Right? But it's all learned out over here in oral tradition. Right? But the prophets took it as a given. So how do the prophets know? How did Jeremiah himself, a good question, how in the world did Jeremiah say, and if he's a prophet, again, he can't contradict Moshe Rabbeinu, he has to keep what the Torah says, right? Otherwise he's a false prophet, right? So how can he say that you're not allowed to do commerce on Shabbos? How did he know? A little birdie told him? Where did he get it from? How in the world did he understand? Right? So we see, we see over here that obviously had other information. Not only that, we see it's complex, and we have how do we have a calendar? Right? The Torah in Book of Exodus chapter 12, very beginning of chapter 12. What does the Torah tell me? Right? Calendar. You got to fix the months. Okay. We have a consistent calendar. What's it based on? What's it based on? Is it a lunar calendar? Right? Is it a solar calendar? And even if it's a lunar calendar, just like the Muslims, even if it's a lunar calendar, I have a problem. What's the problem with the lunar calendar? Lunar calendar is 11 and a half days, give or take, different than a solar calendar. So if that's true, the Torah tells me that Passover has to be in the spring. Now, if there's a lunar calendar, guess what? Every year we're going to lose some days. So therefore, if Passover has to be in the spring, then the problem is going to be that, let's say 2 years down the line, 3 or more, 4 or 5 years down the line, let's say, what's going to happen? Passover is going to be in the summer. It's going to be past the spring. It's going to be in the summer. Now, if that's true, and I don't make any adjustment to the calendar, I got a problem. The Torah tells me clear, again, Karaites are going to be ecstatic here. No oral law. The Torah says that when does Passover come out? In the spring. It's not in the summer, and it's not in the fall. Now, the Muslims don't make any compensation. So Ramadan for them can be winter, spring, summer, or fall. It just depends when it comes out, right? But we have inherent something in oral law that you have to have what we call a leap year. You have to have an extra month in order to compensate, right? I think it's like 7 times out of 19-year cycle. 7 times out of 19 years, there's a leap year. There's an extra month, right? We had that this year, right? We had that this year. There's an extra month. Because if you don't have an extra month, what do I do? How do I compensate over here? Right? So, there are a lot of things, there are a lot of things, over here. Mention another thing, a staple on Shabbos that people eat. It's called cholent. What is cholent? Beans, barley, potatoes. Some people put in rice, some people put in kishka, put in other things. The longer you cook it, the better it gets. Why do we eat cholent? In general, definitely shows belief in oral tradition. Why? Because we eat hot food on Shabbos. Because the Karaites say, can't kindle a fire. Got to sit in the dark. Right? I can't imagine how much fun Shabbos is when you can't see anything. Right? You can't, imagine, we're going to change the clocks here in Israel soon. And, this, states, whatever, like a month later, 3 weeks later. So imagine the wintertime. In the wintertime, gets dark very early. So imagine Shabbos comes in, the earliest, let's say here in Israel, comes in, it's like, 10 past 4, 12 past 4, whatever it is, comes in early. Other places in England come in, 3:30, whatever the case is. But imagine, okay, Shabbos comes in, can't use electricity. Right? Have to sit in the dark. So imagine, so you're sitting there for hours, hours at night. You're sitting in the dark. That would make Shabbos so unbelievably enjoyable. Can't even imagine, right? So the carrots are going to take the Torah literally over here. We spoke about them. They don't eat any hot food, and they sit in the dark, right? So what is that a sign over here? That's a sign by us to show we don't hold like them. That not only, we have lights on, you can leave them on, then go off on a timer, whatever the case is. Certainly we can do that, but they're going to sit in the dark. They're going to eat only, cold food. So we're showing that we're not like them, right? 100%. We are doing things not like them, right? In order to show that that's the case. That's the case. So what do I see? I absolutely need oral tradition, right? If I don't have oral tradition, I don't understand anything. But the question that we have, from the beginning is the fact that if they don't believe, in what the rabbis say, they don't buy what the rabbis say, they can't have their own traditions based on that. There's another example, right? That's how I got my nickname Checkmate over here. The Torah says a Moabite cannot come into the community of the Jewish people. Can never come in. Seemingly can never come in. Now, everybody agrees. Christians are certainly going to agree, and it's important for them. It's certainly important for the Jews that if you read at the end of the book of Ruth, that we read the book of Ruth on Shavuos, but if you look at the end of the book of Ruth, what does the end of the book of Ruth do? It gives genealogy of where King David comes from. Now, King David, it's crucial, certainly for us, that the future Messiah is going to be from the Davidic line, right? He's going to be from the Davidic line. For the Christians, okay, there's difference of opinion among the Gospels, exactly the genealogy that goes back to King David, but there's a problem. There's an inherent problem. The Torah says the Moabite can never enter the congregation of the Jewish people. Never. So if that's true, then how is Ruth considered a Jew? She can't convert, right? Seemingly a Moabite can never convert. That's what it sounds like. They can never enter the covenant even if they convert. So if that's true, everybody agrees. Ruth came from Moab. That's Ruth chapter 1, right? Ruth comes from Moab. If Ruth comes from Moab, that's what everyone agrees, right? She comes from Moab. How can 3-4 generations later, how can King David come from her? If I don't have oral law, and I had someone dog me for a long time, telling me we don't believe in the rabbis, I only listen to God, and God's only going to tell me what do I need the rabbis for, all these things. Very good. So I asked that question. Coming with a few interesting explanations. Not obviously explanation I was looking for. I mean, it was kind of crazy explanations. But, finally, months later, took a long time, months later, they finally came back. And they said, okay, Rabbi, I don't have an answer. So I admit I pick and choose. I pick and choose with what the rabbis say. Very good, right? At least admit. I'd be much happier if people would admit they pick and choose, right? So someone's going to ask, so how do you know what the answer is? How do I know what the answer is? It's not in TaNaCh. There's nowhere in TaNaCh that gives me an answer. Nowhere in the early prophets, later prophets, the writings, King David, in Psalms, Proverbs, nowhere. Doesn't tell me anywhere what the answer to this question is. Now, how do I know what the answer is? I know what the answer is for one very simple reason, because oral law tells me. But if I didn't have oral law, I have a major, major question. There's no King David over here. There's no future Messiah. Right? That would be it. Zero. So if that's the case, I need some explanation. 100%, I need some explanation over here. If I don't have an explanation, how do I have a future Messiah? Got a problem, right? So we know where the answer lies in. I mean, it's only one answer, right? But it relies in oral law. Anyone, wants to find an answer outside of oral law, find me on Facebook at Rabbi Chaim Coffman, Beyond Orthodox Conversion Judaism. You send me an email, Rabbi Chaim Coffman at gmail.com. Send me an answer. Send me an answer where it comes from, right? But that's kind of crucial. Certainly for Jews and Christians, where the future Messiah comes from. But if he can't, if he's not Jewish, if he's not coming from a Jewish mother, I got a major problem. Because it says a Moabite can never enter the covenant. So if it says a Moabite, that means everybody. We don't make a distinction between men and women. It means everybody. So if it means everybody, I got an issue, right? I got an issue over here. So it's about definition, right? I need definitions. They don't have definitions. They are going to rely on us. That's just the nature of the beast over here. They 100% are going to rely on us. So if they would say, if they would say that, I'm going to pick and choose, okay, that's what they're going to say. But how do I know what it means? How do I know what any of these things mean? I wouldn't know anything. But again, the Torah cannot impose fines, God forbid, death penalty, other things where the Torah doesn't tell me how it works. That would be extremely unfair. We know by Salofcha, the father of five daughters, hey, a father died, in the desert. We don't, all about the laws of inheritance. Right, how the laws of inheritance work. What is the Torah doesn't tell me what Salofcha did. Right, doesn't say. Right, but the Torah does say. Torah does talk about someone who picked up wood on Shabbos, and he's liable for a death penalty. Now the Torah doesn't say. Oh, by the way, it's one of the major things you're not allowed to do. But that's what happened. He was liable for a death penalty. They killed him. They ended up killing him. And they killed him in the end. So no question exactly why he did it. Right? Transgression for the sake of heaven. Not the topic here. Right? Maybe, for another week. But doesn't say anything. It just says he picked up sticks. He's liable for a death penalty. Well, very good. There's only one problem. The Torah didn't tell me it was forbidden. The Torah didn't tell me, if you pick up sticks, if you pick up sticks on Shabbos, you're liable for a death penalty. Right? Torah doesn't tell me that. Torah doesn't tell me that at all. It only tells me 3. You're not allowed to kindle a fire. You're not allowed to cook. You're not allowed to carry. That's what Torah tells me. It doesn't say anything about this, but we understand that's forbidden also. But, it wasn't a direct command. It doesn't seem like there was a direct command over there. But they killed him anyway. Right? They killed him anyway. So that wouldn't be fair. Right? The Torah itself, the way it's set up, and the way, things are forbidden, and what certain punishments, we don't even know what the punishments are for certain things. Right? Torah doesn't tell me. Right? Torah doesn't necessarily even allude to it. But at the same time, as we said before, if someone's going to get fined, someone's going to get in trouble for doing something, whatever the punishment may be, the bottom line over here is that you need to tell me why. You need to tell me what it is that the person did. So as we said before, these are like the cliff notes over here. This is like the shorthand. So I'm getting all the information, very good. But I'm not getting any definitions. A law book by definition, should give me, no pun intended, right? Should give me definitions over here. Should tell me, okay, soup to nuts. The Torah doesn't do that. The Torah just tells me, don't do this, don't do that. Do this or whatever. It doesn't tell me how to do things. So how in the world, how in the world would I know? I wouldn't know. Someone there points out, common law. How would you know cultural meaning according to locality? Okay, so if I know, here's a good example. The Torah tells me on the 15th of Nisan, right, I have to celebrate Passover. The Torah tells me I have to eat matzah. That's what the Torah says. I have to eat matzah. Now, if I go anywhere in the world on the 15th of Nisan, right, I go anywhere in the world. I go to America. I go to Israel. I go to, Timbuktu, wherever it is. Biggest Passover Seder in the world every year is in Kathmandu. You get all these Israelis travel after the army. You got, a couple thousand people in Kathmandu in Tibet, right, at Passover Seder. So even if you go in Kathmandu, you go to Thailand, you go to any of these places, on the 15th of Nisan where Jews are, what are they going to have at their table? They're going to have 3 matzahs, 4 cups of wine. They're going to have bitter herbs or herbs, depending where you're from. And what else are they going to have? They're going to have a 5th cup. What's the 5th cup? What's the 5th cup over here? 5th cup is for Elijah the prophet. Everyone agrees. That if I go anywhere in the world, that's what's going to happen. Some more, some less, but that's really the base. So now, if that's true, how do they know what to do? How did every Jewish community in the world, I forgot Canada, right? South America, right? Any Jewish community in the world, how did they get it right? How are they all doing the same thing? You're going to say, well, they learned it from locality. Very good. Everywhere in the world? That's a huge coincidence. Huge coincidence. To tell me everybody's doing the exact same thing. Isn't, maybe we'll get to this another time. Isn't oral law just like a big game of telephone? How do I know it's authentic? How do I know that if we're all doing the same thing, it's all the right thing? How do we know it's, the same thing that, from 2,000 years ago or more? But if I see that everyone's doing the same thing, more or less, right? Especially Passover is a good example. More or less. Now, if that's true, how did they get that? Everywhere in the world, even in Kathmandu. No, it doesn't matter. Person's Reform, conservative, they're all more or less doing similar things, certainly on Passover, right? They may have some innovations, different things, but they all have matzah. They all have bitter herbs, right? I don't know, more progressive people don't, whatever the case is, but seemingly they do, right? They have similar things. How'd they get it right? How in the world did they get it right? Right? That's a mind-boggling idea. That's one event. That's one event in history. That's so many ramifications. If it's a big game of telephone and they're all doing the same thing, wow, they got lucky. 100%. 100% they got lucky over here. So you want to tell me it's by locale? How can it be by locale? If every single locale in the world got it right, how'd they get it right from? You think way back when people all over the world had, such contact, 2,000 years ago. I mean, they to a certain point, people heard of other things and this and that, but for every community to get it right, so today it's a lot easier, right? It's a much smaller world today. People, listening to this and other things all over the world at the same time. Unbelievable thing. But if that's true, way back when, how'd they get it right? You're going to say, well, they all got lucky. How'd they all get lucky? If I had all the money I don't have, and all the scotch I owe William over here. If I had all that money, I'd put it down and say that's an impossibility. It's not going to happen 1 in a billion times. It's going to be 0. 0 means 0. Never going to happen. All across the world, same day, right? Same night, everyone's doing more or less the same thing. That's unbelievable. That's like, going to say, 100 times out of 100 when I play roulette, I'm going to hit black 13. I probably would, right? But in general, it's never going to happen. It's an impossibility. So you can't tell me, right? You can't tell me over here, come on. This is the whole thing. This whole thing, it's only by locale. How can it be by locale? That doesn't make any sense logically. Especially if you're going to go all over the world, every single city and every place where Jews are, at that time. Or, come Sunday. Come Sunday night. Where are Jews going to be? They're going to be in their sukkah. Hopefully it's not raining, in different places. Right? They're all going to be doing the same thing. So, boy, we got it right somehow, and everyone's doing, the same thing, give or take. So if that's true, how they get it right? Right? And I guess that's a good segue to know, is it a big game of telephone or not? But if everyone's doing the same thing, that's an unbelievable coincidence. Unbelievable coincidence. Right? So the idea is just tell me I pick and choose. Just tell me I pick and choose what the rabbis say. Can't say I never hold by what the rabbis say. Because again, I have to look into this thing about the Samaritans, how they read the Torah without vowels. That's a mind-boggling idea. That's an absolutely mind-boggling idea. But even if that would be the case, right? Just throw this out there. Even if that would be the case, where are the Samaritans today? Even if they could do that, even if we give them the benefit of the doubt, where are they? Same place where the Karaites are. They don't exist. I don't care if they're 50,000 Karaites. They don't exist. We don't hear about them. What have the Samaritans done in the last 100 years, 150 years, 200 years? Where are all all these groups of Samaritans popping up all over the world? Gonzo. They disappeared. So even if you tell me they could do that, what happened to them? How they disappear? Food for thought.
Shalom, my dear friends. Hope this message finds you well. If you like the way this channel is going, and the channel has been a blessing to you, please consider supporting the channel by going to the website, TaNaChTalk.com. TaNaChTalk.com. Thank you once again for your time and for supporting TaNaCh Talk. Shalom.
Yep, lots of food, lots of thoughts. So, good deal. Well,
listen, we just came out of Yom Kippur. We're still trying to recover over here, but no question about that.
There you go. All right, well, thank you guys for tuning in. It's been a good full show as usual. Rabbi, again, thank you for your time, and I hope everybody has a wonderful evening. Rabbi, thank you, and we'll see you, Hashem willing, next week, same time, same place. Take care, everybody. Thanks.